Good morning, everybody. Well, here we are. We're going to start working on some thumbnails today. And I already started one here. Just forgot to turn the recorder on by accident. It was just really, really rough. And I'm going to record part of my process for you because I'm trying to inspire some of my students a little bit more to get used to developing their ideas by working from a small format and thinking about what's going to happen. So what I did here on the bottom, you'll notice I wrote upshot from forest and then valley because I'm trying to think of two different ways to influence my characters walking to their location. So I'm treating this as if I'm at a studio and I'm working on a project where I was just handed, a script outline, and there might call for this establishing shot. So basically you saw the first part of this series where we're talking about a dedicated project where we have to create 3 shots. We have an establishing shot with a character. We have a medium close-up shot, which is sort of like our arriving to our location. And then we have our final shot, which is something happening in the location or leaving and exiting the overall location. So those are what I call key shots. And sometimes, you can get brought onto a production in the early phase of like visual development or the pre-production phase, and you have to come up with these key shots and ideas. There's been some other times where I've had to develop key shots, and those key shots are to for the producers to persuade investors or other people to invest into a particular property or idea. So that's what these thumbnails are for, and I want to walk you through part of that process. So right here, I stopped the recorder for a minute, came back. I was talking about melted pancakes and just about roughing out really simple angular lines, about playing opposites. You'll notice that the thumbnail on the top has lots of round shapes, okay, which I learned from Mr. Graber back in the day, melted pancakes, right? And then the characters on the bottom, that environment has lots of angular shapes. So the reason why I was talking about this is while I was sketching in class, one of my students said that they were getting stuck on figuring out part of their environment, and they felt like they're all looking the same. So I was trying to tell them, if your environments are all looking the same, you have to be able to play opposites. So if you're working with lots of curves, you have to be able to go back into your environment and start working with opposites, which would be, straight angles and edges, and you get a different feel to it. And I could still go back in, and keep developing my pieces accordingly. But as I'm doing, every thumbnail I'm doing right now is directing me in a particular pathway for what I want to create. So, and you'll see coming up here is that as soon as I start thumbnailing, my beginning thumbnails sort of suck, and they're not the direction I want to go into. And this is like, we talk about this all the time, is that my first couple sets of thumbnails are my weakest thumbnails. And the more thumbnails that I do, the better I get at figuring out my shape language, the distance between foreground, midground, and background, or what I call like my Z depth. That's just a Maya term, the way I think of it. And then I need to develop from there. And then every one I keep doing, I just get better and better and better. And I start to come up with new ideas and new conclusions, that aid me in this process. So to me, this is really, really important. I used to spend, I'm telling my students to spend countless hours thumbnailing. And the reason for that is when I look back upon myself and my work, which I know I have a video, I'm going to show a bunch of my work, what I do and what my background is. I haven't done that on YouTube yet, but I will do it soon. But part of my background was trained as an illustrator and to be a environment designer, and that's how I came up. And some of that training I got from some really talented people, Robert St. Pierre, Michael Spooner, and not only did they teach me some of their thinking and mentality from an industry point of view, but I also had the opportunity to learn more about how they were trained to draw in general. Okay, so what I did here is I'm quickly talking briefly about, I'm always thinking about this right here that I outlined in red. I'm always thinking about my silhouette shapes that exist in my foreground, and how does that silhouette shape, even in a small image, what does that convey to the viewer? If I'm dealing with Amazon jungle in an ancient Mayan city, I need to be really concerned about what those visual reads are happening in my work and what I'm conveying to my audience, right? It's of extreme importance, okay? So Sorry, a couple times here I didn't mean to. I left the recorder on and off. This is what happens when I'm drawing in the classroom sometimes, and students are asking questions, and I'm like saving files and doing 10 other different things. So let me save this before I forget really quick. So I have plenty more here, and I did have to speed up this video and go back and voice over because it was approximately 2 hours long. And all my friendly artist brethren out there, I don't know if you're going to enjoy a 2 hour long video of me talking and going into a possible tangency. So I sped it up quite a bit. So what I'm doing here is I'm sketching out my character. My two characters I'm thinking about are a gorilla and a little boy. And they're traveling on this journey through the Amazon forest trying to get to this ancient Mayan city. So you'll see me sketch in, and I haven't done the character design yet. I will do that in another demo. I haven't got to that point yet. Right now I'm just thinking about staging. So my characters can be totally rough. I don't see anything wrong with that. And they're not for automatic size placement right now. So the purpose of me doing all these little sketches is for me to have the ability to go back to like a production designer, an art director, or even a layout supervisor, or just whoever my boss might be. You know, it could be a producer at this point. It could be the creator of a particular story. And I'm just showing them ideas and pathways that indicate how the characters are moving through their scene. Once I get an okay on a thumbnail, the cool thing is then I could take that thumbnail, I could blow it up, and I can start working over it as a block-in phase in Photoshop. And then I could add lights and so on, and then I'm good to go. Okay? So here I'm sort of like this idea of the characters surrounded by tons of canopy. I put trail surrounded by canopy there. That was my visual reference. I do this quite a bit where I write down my idea, and I like the thought of them being really low, like stuck in a crevasse of jungle, and they're looking upward, and in the back, you know, is this ancient ruin that they've accidentally found of a Mayan city, you know. So that's sort of the direction that I'm going. The other thing is I'm really trying to make sure I play in some of my foreground elements. Excuse me, I can't talk. It's like 4:30 in the morning right now. I woke up early to put this all together for my students for today's class. So anyway, my body isn't still full functioning yet. So let me drink a little bit more coffee here. Nothing's better than fresh coffee early in the morning. So that thumbnail, you know, I just jumped to the next one. This one I was thinking about a waterfront. So I really do like that idea that I just did, because I like the idea of the characters being down below in the city that they're trying to get to as of a very important magnitude. And by elevating it up above them, it helps to create, to emphasize some of the visual story aspect of what is taking place in part of this overall location, you know. So I think that's very, very important, you know. Come up with ideas, and one of the things I like to do and think about whenever I'm drawing an environment is elevation is key to me, because it usually conveys that a character or sets of characters are trying to get from one location to another. And you know, part of our historical significance of architecture and throughout all civilizations is the more you elevate something, the closer it is to God, the higher it is in terms of like power and structure, and definitely more importance too. So you know, especially if you go to if you go to Catholic church, Christian church, or you know, you're going to see whoever's administering that particular ceremony, they tend to be elevated above everybody else. They have a cross or a painting or stained glass window that's way up above everybody else. So I thought that would be important for me. The other idea I had here on the waterfront is maybe part of the Amazon. I do think of water a lot, and I'm thinking like there's water coming through like this huge creek that's winding all the way back to this city. And I mean, they're up on this giant wooden this branch, you know, from this huge, you know, branching system throughout the forest, and they have to get from, you know, the beginning, and they're looking at this ancient city that they accidentally discovered on this perch, and they're looking out at miles and miles that they have to cross to get through. So I like that idea, and I'm trying to convey that, put some angular shapes in here and make it look a little bit more uh, intimidating, a little bit more deadly, and just overgrown with leaves and branches. I mean, so as I come back and sort of darken parts of my thumbnail here, that's what I'm going for, just to give you the visual of why I'm thinking about what I am, and definitely the other thing too is I need the characters to sort of pop out, I need a way for them to become part of the visual read. So you first remember, I was telling a student this the other day, is your job is to impress your boss, whether that be your director, your producer, whoever it might be, and you're not always in the room to do that. So that means you have to be able to create a visual that's going to give them a detailed visual read and indicate a story in a matter of seconds. And you're not there to explain it and go, oh, well, this is what I was thinking, this is what I was going for. No, that's not going to happen. You're not going to be standing in that room a lot of times. Sometimes, yeah, you are, but there are other times when you're not going to be in there. So, that's what I was talking about to a student, got in that conversation about a portfolio, and your portfolio is your work that represents you. And if you have a piece of work in it that sucks, there's a problem. That work represents your ability on your weakest day. So here I thought of maybe they're climbing up this hill and the gorilla's like holding the young boy and he's like pulling his way up sideways off this hill. Thought that could be a cool little staging element. Shows that they're climbing upward just to get to this peak. So anyway, about what I was saying before, just remember that when you create your work, you're not always there to tell a story on it or to tell your background or what you're thinking or why there's necromancers in it. Just kidding. Your goal is to be able to hand your work off and have everybody around you understand. And that's something that's like a real basic and part of our industry. And if you can't do that, especially now, I just finished doing some freelance, and I'm not even in there. I'm emailing my freelance now because of, you can work globally with different clients, and I'm sending work off and thumbnails and ideas, and I'm doing little storyboard shots and thumbnails. Yeah, those are getting emailed directly to the client. I'm not even in that room. I don't even know if they're even speaking the same language that I'm speaking. If I'm sending something to Europe and it's going to a production that's happening in Germany, they're going to look at it and be talking about it. I'm not even there. And if I was there, what am I going to say? So again, your work needs to represent and have visuals in it, quick visual reads, and simple solutions to what your problem solving is. Okay, so I do like that thumbnail quite a bit. Like what I like about it right now is the boy, the shapes in there in the foreground. I like how the composition sort of spread out, showing a lot of distance from the left side of the screen all the way to the right side of the screen. To me, that's really working pretty cool. I like it. So, and to be honest, when I was doing this thumbnail right here, this is where I felt a sense of, hey, things are working. They're really starting to come together. And for me, that was, I usually say it's about my 7th thumbnail where I start to get a little bit of freedom in my work and have a feel for what's happening. So I think that's on its right path right there. So let's start another one here. Now that I'm starting to feel that break-in period, right? And you guys know what I'm saying. There's a flow that happens. The funny thing about this is I was just talking the other day to my daughter about this because she goes out sketching with me. She's in 5th grade, and she's filling up her sketchbook. And she quickly discovered, she's not drawing environments or anything, at least not yet. But she's sketching like girls and dolls and characters and, light, like funny stuff like Bratz dolls type of thing. Anyway, don't ask. So she's sketching, and I told her, like, I noticed we'd been there for about 2.5 hours drawing, and she hit her 4th drawing and she nailed it. And I told her, I'm like, hey, you keep doing more and more drawings, and you're feeling that flow now, right? And that flow is starting to happen where your ideas are clicking, you're coming up with lots of variants, and so on. So now I'm starting to feel the flow, feel the energy, right? You're loose, your mind's not all focused on anything else. You're listening to some good music and you're just working. So here I was thinking about my characters walking across this giant, like, Amazon branch of some kind. I don't want to say fallen tree, but in my mind, the way I'm envisioning part of my forest is just this, like imagine the vein structure of the human body, but in giant vines. So as they're crossing, they're walking over lots of vines with plant, leaf, and growth, and that's taking them on their location. And then in the very back, you'll see there's like a waterfall back there behind all that, and that's where the city would be. So they can see the city, and they're crossing, sort of zigzagging to get to their overall location, but maybe they don't know how to get there because they can see it, and that's the frustrating feeling when you can look and see something but you don't know how to get there. And I also like it for a staging point of view, how I can have, going from left to right, have all this foliage, and then we could see the characters sort of right there. Maybe there's some dark and light getting them to pop out, and then here's part of that waterfall right here, and then you could easily see how that's starting to connect and work. And I actually like this one quite a bit. I feel like I was hitting a fun idea. I also like that huge diagonal in the composition, and then back here is like there's the waterfall, and maybe the city's back there somewhere. Okay, all right, let's do another. By the way, you'll see what I wrote down here. I wrote down here on the side a couple little tips, and I didn't want to forget these. I'm going to come back to this, but I was thinking statues, old ruins, quicksand, lava, rock, and lots of curves. So for some reason the curves stuck in my head on this sketch, but I wrote down these ideas that I had really quick because I want to be able to go back into them and define them up a little bit more, which I will. This is only, I think by the end of this demo here, I've done, I don't know, probably in real time is maybe about 2 hours of thumbnails. So if I was in a studio environment, I would easily dedicate a whole day to thumbnails, which would, to me, would be, that's a dedicated 8-10 hour day, right? And I would have, if I'm doing this many in 2 hours, imagine how I could go back into this and think about the ruins and the quicksand, the lava, and actually part of those ideas I wrote down there are going to deal with my next shot. But they're popping into my brain now, so I'm going to write it down. Okay? So, anyway, I imagine this sort of curvy, windy trail maybe made out of rock, and my characters are walking up and down all these rocks, and as that somehow part of the floor of the jungle is giant crevasses with maybe also water coming through, so you have like dual hazardous conditions, and well, yeah, to me that's important because you don't want to. It's not like they're walking down the yellow brick road and it's super easy for them to get to their overall location. They need to experience some form of obstacles. In fact, a huge part of storytelling is conveying that there are obstacles happening inside there. So, and then maybe back here I have part of that structure. Okay, they've discovered this ancient Mayan city, but just to get there, they still have to go through this wandering jungle and river of despair and crevasses, and maybe there's they're walking along and there's like skeleton bodies and traps set up because you could also tie in local natives into this. There are local natives, and and they still idolize these ruins, right? So there's all kinds of elements you can still put in. Those are things I could maybe throw in more of what I would call like a medium close-up shot, which we'll talk about next. I'll have a demo coming up on that pretty soon. That'll be the next one I'm doing in this series. So this is for my intermediate digital painting class where I've shown them we're working in tone. I also have some advanced students working on this because what's really cool is I changed up my assignments a little bit. I wanted to really encourage my students to be able to stage and do a little bit more storytelling. Oh, by the way, that was the path of action that I'm thinking about. In all of animation, you always have like a dedicated path of action you're taking your viewers on. And also that might be something that storyboard artists would work along with. So if I were to take this thumbnail and it was sort of green lit, I would then go along different parts of that path of action I just showed you really quickly there, and I would then draw multiple angles or views from that path of action. Okay, there. Those are my shapes integrated to part of my path of action, right? So, special note to self, those are two things you sort of have. You have a path of action, always in animation, because that's what it's about. And then you also, I need to think about what are my visual shapes happening? What is that conveying to the viewer? So what I'm going for here is rocky, mountain, treacherous, high angle shapes that these characters are having to cross, combined with water in the middle of this giant cavern of some kind, you know, and up above is the sky with light coming through, and there's our location. There's like our hidden city, right? And you need to feel that. I mean, remember, I was looking at a whole bunch of reference, you know, before I did this. In fact, I was giving my students a hard time. Print out your reference. You can't look and memorize it, everything. You have to have it visible in your hand. Look, it's right here on a piece of paper. See it right there? Look, I'm tapping it. I know you can't see it, but at least you can hear it. There's my reference right there. I have it to look at, okay? I did pull out my picture frame a little bit more here because I wanted, with it up close a little bit before, you couldn't see the waterfall. So I wanted the waterfall element to be dropping through here. So I thought if I pull down the frame a teeny bit more, you're going to see that waterfall dipping and dropping. And then I thought, well, if I open up that frame, now I need to put another foreground element in here. So you see the waterfall coming. You have all these angular rocks, this curvy pathway. It almost feels like there's been an earthquake and the ground is uprooting. So I really do like this thumbnail quite a bit. I think there's a lot happening. The other thing that's really cool that's sort of working for me on this is I'm dictating a little bit more about perspective and scale, because I'm having these diagonal rocks overlapping each other, okay, and they're larger in the foreground and then they're getting smaller as they recede back, you know. So that definitely is a really, really important aspect to what I'm trying to do here. All right, so, and then I have my elements here, put another vine or two. So I really do like this. And the other thing too, and maybe it's overkill, because I actually have a joke about the rock that's in there. That rock, my buddy Joe Spadiford, he's an art director, and our friend Michael Spooner, who's a visual development artist over at, Michael's been around forever, and he's over at Sony ImageWorks right now. But I sort of learned that rock from Michael, because Michael used to sketch, and he'd always put like this cool angular rock as compositions. And I sort of, in some weird way, sort of stole that a little bit, because that rock was an important part for me of understanding placement, overlap, pointing, using it as a directional line to point you or modify and move you into a particular composition. I do like this part right here. I love this vine. I love that overlap right there, and how that sort of still brings you up to the old ruins. The ruins are elevated, of course, and then I really do like the characters, but I want to make the characters maybe a little bit smaller to make the world feel a little bit larger around them. So, you know, I like the direction that this thumbnail has developed into. Cool in the gang, you know. So hey, that's what it's about, right? We sit, we draw, we sketch, come up with other ideas, and you're always sort of second guessing what you're working on and thinking of a way to make it a little bit better. And I like that one. That one came out pretty good. So now I've been doing a ton of horizontal sketches. Let's go vertical, right? Flip it. That's what I like to do. You got to, you know, you're doing a bunch of lines, you know, that are straight. You got to go curve. You're doing curved lines. You got to go diagonal. You're working diagonal for a little bit, then maybe switch to trapezoid shapes or trapezoid compositions. Switch it up a little bit. Work on opposites. Opposites are a huge part of drawing. They help people understand and translate things better. So especially when you get into any form of design, I don't care if it's vehicles, spaceships, helmets, characters, you know, realistic character design, game design, or even animated, you know, characters. Which, by the way, that cloud was a happy accident there. I sort of made this straight edge cloud with round poofiness underneath it, And I sort of like that stylization in it. And I'm going to, by doing that little thumbnail, coming up with that cloud idea, that's going to influence me for the rest of part of my design process. Is I thought, what if there's, like more moisture where the underneath side of the cloud is round and maybe the wind's blowing up above the cloud, so it's very flat on the top, and it sort of adds sort of a stylized feel to it, which I think is sort of cool, So here I really wanted to push that feel of elevating up the Mayan ruins and just being submerged in this massive jungle and just waterfalls coming everywhere and large branches. I mean, like there might be the marks for some of my waterfalls. The only problem is maybe I'm getting too many verticals in there. So I need to find a way to simplify it. I don't want 5 all the same distance. I was just checking my horizon line there and make sure that I have objects underneath it that I can see on top of. And I get my characters in the right placement. And then as they're walking forward, boom, we're looking up at that overall location. So, and honestly, in the back of my mind, from doing roughs and staging, and one of the things that was really valuable to me was when I started working in Maya, I was drawing my environments and then building them in 3D, was sitting down with my storyboard artists, because I quickly learned how board artists think. And what I would do is I'd set up cameras in Maya, and then I would do blocking for them, and I would move my camera. So when I was doing this shot, I was thinking of like a truck up shot where right now we're on the characters and framed, and then in the lower segment, and then we pan up as they're maybe talking, and maybe they don't even know that Mayan city's there, but because they're submerged in all this jungle and they're walking. But as the sequence is taking place, we basically pan up with the frame directly above to expose where they are. That's absolutely that's a 100% guaranteed shot that could happen there, and I know because I've done it before, working on shows. So man, I wish I had some spare time. We have a cool teacher here at our school. His name's Brian Murray, and teaching. How cool is this? Well, number one, he went to our school, our community college, Fullerton, right, back in the day. And number two is that he's a professional board artist now, and he just finished working on a movie with Steven Spielberg. Yeah, there's the shout out, right, Brian? Brian's killing it. So imagine sitting in a room, you're Brian Murray, and you're sitting there pitching your board sequences, and right across from you, sitting at the table, is Steven Spielberg. I was like, dude, I would have to wear a pair of Depends, because I'd be sitting like right next to Spielberg, and I'd probably like either pee my pants or poop my pants or something. Because to me, there's like the god of all of composition and storytelling, and he's sitting right there looking at your boards, making comments, talking about the staging. And I mean, how cool would that be, right? That would be totally awesome. So anyway, I think that's pretty cool that we have an instructor at our school that you're coming and you're taking, he teaches 2 storyboard classes, and he's showing you boards and stuff that he's done professionally after the non-disclosure agreements pass. And he's showing you his professional work on how he sets up scenes and tells stories, And I mean, how cool is that, right? So that'd be awesome. One of these days, I'm going to stop. I don't do as much freelance for environments anymore. I do in terms of doing a key shot maybe, or more art, but I'm starting to move more in a direction of where I want to be involved in more of the storytelling process and thinking about the aided visuals that guide members of the audience to adhering to part of the goals of the script. It's basically setting up scenes and action scenes and setting up things that are going to happen. To me, that's really, really cool. That's really important. So I'm noticing a lot of my drawings, I'm starting to get a lot more heavily involved in the staging side, so I can really see myself probably in the next, I'd say maybe 6 months to a year, just developing more pieces that deal with, they're like very detailed storyboards, basically. That's the direction I'd like to move into. And of course, if I have time, which I think I will be able to have time soon, I'm going to take Brian Murray's awesome storyboard class, right? Absolutely. So, pretty cool. By the way, I just want to extend this invite. If any of you guys out there in YouTube land, if you're ever in Southern California, give me a ring, shoot me an email, stop by the school. You're more than welcome to. We have a free Friday drawing costume figure event. Come out, hang out, draw with us. And I'll try to record that and show you what we do every Friday. It's pretty cool. You know, it's free for the students. We have free food. We have costume figure drawing. You just hang out. You know, you sketch, have a good time, talk with other people. Again, look at the difference in the quality of the thumbnails. See how much more. I mean, I really like this idea too. I like the staging. I like the visual reads. And I could just imagine the characters walking and talking like, I don't know where this place is. You know, and then the gorilla's like, well, Danny, you gotta understand something, gotta be a little bit of patience, you know. And look, they're not even at that world, but it's above them. They don't realize it. So, all right, let's do another one here. And then after this thumbnail, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop real quick, and I'm going to do another thumbnail, but I'm going to try to stylize it and not have as much detail and information in it. So the reason why I'm going to do that on this next to last thumbnail is I have a couple students that work in a little bit more stylized format, and I want them to understand that the only difference between stylization and realisticness is just graphic shapes and flattening part of what you're doing. Okay, so here I'm thinking riverfront, directly across the river, so, you know, with mountains surrounding it. Boom, we look over and you see these Mayan elements, these Mayan temples are just right there in the staging, right? There's no missing them. But you have this massive river here that's connecting through part of your drawing. You have leaves and you're surrounded by jungle, right? And it's so funny because you guys hear sort of that energy in my voice, right? I can't wait to get to the next sequence. The next sequence is one of my favorite parts. This is the establishing shot portion of what we're doing in our design phase. The next part is the fun part, which is like characters going through their environment, medium close-up shots, getting to their location. Oh my God, that gets me to so jazzed because I already had all these visions. Here's a vision I had in my head. I'll tell you while I'm sketching here, right? I had this idea of the characters walking over this like rickety road that bends up, and there's like old ruins, and they're walking on this road that's very thin because around them is a bunch of water, and the water drops, and inside this water pit there's like all these giant piranhas just looking up, but they can't really see maybe what's underneath them. So I thought that would be a really, really cool shot, because when you're dealing with shots like that, you know, you're displaying part of the characters, you're displaying part of the story plot and the obstacles that the characters have to face given on their journey to get to their overall location, right? That's what you're responsible for doing from a story point of view. So when you're doing that, what you have to really consider in there is you have to really think about what are they going to encounter? What are these obstacles going to be? Well, look at my sketch right here. My obstacle right now is water. It's overgrown trees. It's tons of foliage and overgrown leaves and structures. And then one of my students was sitting in the back of the class and he goes, what about giant Venus flytraps? And I'm like, oh my God, excellent, right? Something else for them to overcome. And then I was even thinking about what if there's some type of like funky Amazon spider that no one's ever seen before, and there's like a trap and they're all like dropping and the characters have to figure out how to get out of that. So, you know, it's just writing these ideas down. So again, these would be pitches. So if I was working at, let's say if I was at DreamWorks and I was storyboarding out a sequence, this is something I might board up in key shots and then show as part of that story sequence, trying to pitch what is going to happen to the characters when they're going to go through it, why they're going to experience this obstacle, and most importantly, what is the benefit of that obstacle? You know, the benefit to me now is conveying that my environment is a shitty place to be, and it's a really difficult place to be, and it's very dangerous, and my characters have suffered a lot trying to go through part of this to get to their end location. So I really do like this idea quite a bit here. By the way, a great way to draw branches. My poor mom has rheumatoid arthritis. If you go look up what that looks like, your knuckles, okay, they get all bent and your fingers sort of bend. And I know this sounds really, I hope it doesn't sound bad, but when I think of jungle trees, I think of hands. And as the older my poor mom gets, she gets these like her hands get harder to manage and bend and stuff. And in some weird way, big jungle branches and the way they connect into the ground and the water, it's really like messed up rheumatoid arthritis ridden hands, you know what I mean, with big knuckles on them and stuff. And to me, that really conveys part of the feeling of a tree and gives you that overall, feel of what's happening. So so we're definitely in the middle of the waterway here. Again, I'm thinking giant tree and hill back here with stuff just elevating forward, right, shooting up above the ground floor of where the water is. That principle of elevation again, where the city is elevated higher than everything else, reaching into the clouds. And then we have just these massive hills and mountains surrounding part of our location, almost like you couldn't even see it. I like that idea that you're in a jungle and you're looking for this old civilization. Maybe you don't see it because the jungle is growing so immersely and it's just so large, you can't find out exactly where all these elements are. And then all of a sudden you turn to like one right angle where you're in the stream and you're looking, and boom, you see the shot up in front of you. It could be like that. Why not? To me, I think that's coming through part of this, and I like that ideal. Let me try to separate, get some more branches and thick vines sort of coming through here. I did have another idea. I had an idea, I haven't done it yet, maybe I'll do it later, of zigzagging fallen trees, right? Not fallen, but like growing trees that are like 2 stories above a waterway, and then there's just covered with vines. So like vines everywhere hanging down, attaching to the trees, and it's really easy to like slip and fall because of the moss. So that's another idea I'd probably throw into a thumbnail, So this actual thumbnail length is probably in the neighborhood. I think this is about, I think on here it's about 10 minutes, and I sped it up about double. So I think it's about a 20-minute thumbnail. But you can see a lot more of the detail I'm getting in here. There's much more intensified amount of detail. Trying to, block all this in and get it feeling correct in terms of depth and perspective. And then what I always do at the end, I just take a little bit of a light grade. And the reason I do this is I just want to separate out some of the silhouette shapes to make sure that part of my visual reads are reading the way that I want and giving me that feel. Because if they're not, I can go back into it and readdress a couple of those areas. And I do like what's happening here. I do get a good feel from this. So, and again, the cool thing is I'm, been doing quite a bit of these thumbnails, and they're working to a really cool level of design in terms of the storytelling. I like what's happening in there, and I like the shapes a lot. And even the way it's dividing up the composition to me feels attractive and interesting. So I think there's a lot of fun taking place in there. There's enough for me to sit down and have a great conversation in terms of staging and scene planning. What would be really cool is how do you now build this how do you build this environment in Maya and make it work? And I could do that, absolutely could, no problems. It's all about camera placement and stacking elements on top of each other and getting the right depth of field in there, the right focus plane with the camera. That's it. It'd be cool. It would take some time, but anyway. So there we go. Look at that, and you get the river coming through there. That's pretty cool. All kinds of chaos and madness. Okay, now here's my last one. Stylized. Here are a couple secrets to working stylized. Okay, number one, we still have a dedicated horizon line. All right. Separate your layers: foreground, midground, background. All the other sketches I was there were pretty much one layer except for the tone. Here, I'm going to throw down part of my horizon line, and I'm going to definitely get in there and separate out elements. So I'm blocking in rough planes, what I'm imagining would be part of my scene, and actually I overlapped. I was too much in the middle. Let me fix that here. So I'm thinking these giant mountains, okay? So I'm basically setting up my foreground, midground, and background. Now I just want you to think graphic in terms of your shapes. So a lot of times when I was drawing plants, I was placing plants and other elements at rotated angles that display more depth. Okay, now I'm not rotating angles, but I'm putting things in to on purposely flatten part of the feel of the piece. So I want you to think about that even if you show a little bit of depth with something, you need to come in and simplify it. That's all you're doing. But the secret to working in that level of simplification is just doing it on the 3 levels that you have, which are your foreground, your midground, and your background. That's it. So now I can get in here and I can just, stylize things and just, put lines and different vertical options, but I'm not putting as much detail, and I'm trying to work a little bit more simplistically, if that makes sense. So, and by the way, this is if I were to do more of these thumbnails, you would see the stylization taking place a little bit easier. So this is my first transition going to a stylized thumbnail from doing the realistic ones that I just did, which is totally fine. It's still workable, but if I were to do about 5 more of these, then I would really nail that stylization, that sort of flat, simple graphic element. So right there, what you see what I pretty much have is that's my foreground elements. It's on a separate layer that's foreground. Now I'm coming out here and I'm going to define a little bit more of what's in the back, trying to make sure I have some different shapes. I'm going to have a little bit of a riverway here that just winds back, really stylized, really simple. And I might just come along and put some large rocks and some other elements along the riverway. People forget that when you have riverways, that's water pushing through from rain and stuff. And when you have water coming through areas, it pushes rocks and dirt and fallen logs, and you create these like separate environmental ecosystems, right? All right. Sorry if you hear a little bit of noise in the back. I found a turtle in the road the other day, and he's in a box right now. I'm going to give him to one of my students, and I don't know what to do with the poor guy. I almost ran him over. He was at a stop sign, and I got out and I look over, and there's this little turtle walking. So I put him in a box, and he hates being in the box. He's like confined. So anyway, see what I'm doing? I'm being sort of simple with my placement and just easy. Just a couple lines, a couple trees, that's it. Nothing more than that. Simple, easy. I'm just going for simple graphic elements on part of my reads. And yes, I have a tendency right there on the lower leaf and the bottom of those leaf patterns. I could fix that later. It's already oinking me that it's there, but that's all right. So I'm putting some contour lines here to represent the shore changing as it goes into the water. A couple base leaves to dictate scale or overlap right here. And then I'm going to come back in here. So there, you see the midground, turn it on and off really quick just to show you the variants that are happening. Okay, so I'm not doing a ton of greenery and foliage on top of the mountain there. I'm just sort of breaking it out into a little bit more simpler approach, just a couple lines on top of it that define the structure. So I like a lot of times on mountains you have like a little bit of grass that overspills the top, and then you have a little bit of bushes on top, maybe a tree or two. So you could definitely get that feel that this is a lot more simplified. It has more of a graphic feel to it already. Let's divide up a couple more shapes, and then I'm at the very back here. I'm going to sketch in part of our building structure here. Maybe there's a little waterfall. Kind of have a waterfall. Waterfalls lead to rivers, right? Absolutely they do. All a waterfall is a drop in the elevation. That's it. Nothing more. So I really like this. There's sort of a funness about it because it's simpler, not as much detail. And to me, I think this is working pretty cool. And then there are my clouds with the flat tops and the upside down. elements there. Okay. So that's my first pass. So imagine if I went over these another 15, spend another, 10 or 15 more thumbnails on figuring out the simplicity. Now what I'm doing here is I didn't add the characters in yet, so I'm putting a little rock shelf to show the characters, maybe standing on there looking over at part of this structure. So I'm thinking here might be a good place. Get it right in about there and erase what's sort of behind it. And then I'm going to sketch it in and put the characters up there. Okay, so try to get a little bit more graphic feel and approach, a little bit more stylization in what's happening here. And I don't like that. Let me fix that. There. Gorillas have an arched back quite a bit. So he's standing there on the end with the boy. I have a leaf that point right to him, so you see him in the composition. And then everything else is directing you in the back there towards, all the other lines acting as sort of directional lines, and they're taking you directly towards the back. So I think it's working pretty good. And man, that's the thing I love about foreground elements, is that sometimes, they're just great for framing. There's just so much you can do with them. I think that's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to wrap it up here in just a minute. Take care, and I will include you on my next lecture and phase of what I'm doing next, okay? Thanks for watching, everybody. Please share. I totally appreciate it. Take care. Hi guys, if you like this video, thanks for watching. I truly appreciate it. Please leave a comment or share it on Facebook with your friends. Thank you for your support. You can find me on Facebook at Artist Philip Dimitriadis or on Instagram, Phil's Design Corner. Take care guys and keep on drawing.